My name is Mindy Jensen, and I'm the community manager for BiggerPockets.com, the real estate investing social network. I spend a lot of time in the forums, and while I have a lot of tips and tricks based on my own experiences, I've picked up some pretty amazing tips from my fellow investors on the site. Here are 10 of my favorite, not so obvious tips for real estate investing success. Tip number 1, your inherited tenant refuses to provide a key to the property. First off, this situation should not even be given a chance to happen. Always get a copy of the key to the property and verify that it works before you close. If the selling landlord doesn't have a copy, they can get one from the tenant. It's a sure bet they've got one. However, if this situation has already passed and the tenant refuses to give you a copy of the key, make your own. First, give your tenant proper notice in compliance with your state's landlord-tenant laws. Then have the property rekeyed by a locksmith. If your tenant isn't home, leave one copy of the key in a real estate agent-style lockbox with code access. Inform your tenant of the code and then retrieve the lockbox at a later date. One more thing to consider, if you've got a combative tenant like this, you may want to consider not renewing their lease. Tip number 2. Your tenant wants to install cable or dish or satellite or something on the outside of the house. You should have a move-in checklist that the tenant signs at the time they take possession, stating the condition of the property. Make a separate checklist that goes over every single important part of the lease and includes a space for tenant initials, so if necessary, you can prove at a later date that they were informed. Do not allow installation of any service without your permission, and make sure to specify in the lease that it must be professional installation. It's also good practice to have the tenant give you a deposit to return the property back to its original condition once they move out. Tip number 3, your tenant threatens a lawsuit. The very moment a tenant utters the word attorney or lawsuit, cease verbal communication with them immediately. Then notify them in writing that you will only communicate with their attorney. Many times, this is the last you will ever hear from them. Remember, text is not currently a legal method of notification in all 50 states, but the U.S. Postal Service is. Tip number 4, handling late rent. Have a clause in your lease for late fees and charge them as soon as your state laws allow. Consider adding a phrase in your late fees clause that says something to the effect of, regardless of tenant directives, any money collected will first be applied towards any outstanding bills or late fees, then applied to rent. Partial rent payments will not be accepted. In many states, accepting partial rent payments stops or forces a restart in the eviction process. Tip number 5, moving out or returning the security deposit. In order to avoid confusion, spell out exactly what you expect the property to look like when your tenant returns it to you. Consider creating a checklist that dictates clean walls, clean carpets, clean appliances, clean drawers, ceilings and corners free from cobwebs, toilets free from stains, window and sliding door tracks free from debris and dirt. You want to make sure that there are no surprises at the end of your relationship with your tenant, and you want to make sure you get a clean property back. Tip number 6, how to return the security deposit. Always get a forwarding address. When the tenant returns the keys, ask for their new address so that you can return any portion of the security deposit. Now, you don't want to tell them that they're getting their deposit back. Word it in such a way that you won't know for sure until you go through the unit, but you need to return it within insert state security law timeline here, and therefore you need their new address. Tip 7, multiple roommates. In a multiple tenant situation, you want to make sure each tenant qualifies individually for the entire rent, and that they know they are individually responsible for the rent should all other roommates not pay or some roommates leave the property. You'll save yourself an enormous amount of hassle by accepting only one check per unit, which forces the tenants to come up with the entire amount before they give it to you. Remember, partial rent should never be accepted. Tip 8, get multiple emergency contacts for prospective tenants on their initial application. If your application only has one space for an emergency contact, consider an additional sheet with a few more. This will give you more numbers to call to track down that tenant who skipped out on you. It's good practice at lease renewal time to ask the resident to update some of their contact information. Most property management companies and owners don't do this. If the resident leaves you with damages or unpaid rent, it gives you more numbers to call to try to get 100% of your money versus sharing it with a collection agency. But if you do use an outside agency, it gives them more numbers to call as well. Tip number 9, eviction notice. Once residency has been established, whether you know about it or not, you must evict each person by name or use the all-encompassing et al. In order to get the property back. Tip 10, tenant notification. Carry a briefcase in your car that has all your forms in it so you can be ready at the drop of a hat to give notice instead of having to drive back to your office to get the forms. Bonus tip 11. I don't have an extra finger. Lease renewal inspection. Do a walkthrough of apartments 2 weeks before you offer a lease renewal. Call it your lease renewal inspection. This way, if the tenant was not taking care of the unit, you have the option of not offering a referral. I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who provided these awesome tips from the forums. For even more priceless information, visit www.biggerpockets.com/forums. This is Mindy Jensen for BiggerPockets. I'll see you around the site.